Hello there friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. In today's video there are going to be spoilers from the last season of The Bad Batch, focused specifically on that very last episode. So while we're waiting for some of the audience to tune out because they haven't seen that episode, I need to address something that I said in our last video that was kind of controversial. Play the clip, Congo. It's not an immediately obvious pairing, but guys, I completely ship Emery and Echo. They make sense. So yeah, I shipped Emery, Carr, and Echo, fully knowing that they were both clones. I guess my brain didn't make the connection. I was sleep deprived. In my defense, I'd stayed up, watched the stupid Wednesday 3 a.m. release. That's when it's released on the East Coast. And so yeah, I made some slip-ups. I promise you, I do not support incestual relationships, even ones that are truly grounded in love. And that's because incest leads to terrible things. It leads to the dark side. Why do I even feel like I need to address this? You know, like in 30 years from now, I am probably going to be canceled for being against incest. That's when, you know, the technology gets better for CRISPR and they manage to get rid of some of the more negative effects of incestual relationships. The point is, you know, growing old can be really scary or confusing, or it can be funny as shit, depending on how you frame everything that is happening around you. Sorry guys, I feel more unhinged than usual. Anyway, The Bad Batch, like the Rebels series, and also like the Clone Wars series, has a time leap at the very end. In the Clone Wars, we first see Ahsoka and Rex burying the remains of the 501st Troopers who died on the Tribunal just after Order 66 is executed. And then that scene flashes forward to the Middle Empire period. We can tell it's the Middle Empire period because of the Lambda-class shuttles, the Stormtroopers, and the Snow Races, as I like to call them, along with the Viper droids. This is definitely not the early Empire period we see in The Bad Batch, which takes place after Order 66 until about a year or two after Order 66. The Empire during this time period was still using a mixture of clones and later TK troopers. There are also no Stormtroopers or Lambda-class shuttles just yet. They just had those little annoying row shuttles. And in the final scene for the Clone Wars, we also get to see Darth Vader. He picks up and discards a lightsaber that he once gifted to Ahsoka, a final indication that their relationship is now completely over. And this scene will loosely connect into the Rebels series, which starts maybe a few years before the Battle of Yavin. I'm guessing that after finding Ahsoka's discarded lightsaber in that Clone Wars episode, Vader probably makes the connection that she escaped the Tribunal alive and is still running around the galaxy, which will of course lead to their showdown later at the Temple on Malachor. On an interesting side note, the 7th season of the Clone Wars actually happens after the Rebels already finished. A little bit confusing. And then of course we have the end scene of the Rebels series. Actually, I kind of have a soft spot for that show and that ending, because this was actually one of the first Star Wars TV shows we covered live as it was airing. It's a long time ago. I guess we're starting to show our age too. The end of Rebels would feature the liberation of Lothal, the destruction of the Imperial garrison there, and the disappearance of Grand Admiral Thrawn to some far-off place. The members of Spectre Team that make it out alive would go on their own separate ways. Some would join the bigger fight against the Empire that would start just a few years later at Scarif. Then we have the final scene that skips forward in time to around 9 ABY, which is when Ahsoka returns to find Sabine Wren. This sequence would be remade almost shot for shot in the Ahsoka series opening episode. And so it's very clear that Star Wars animation has a tendency to hint about new shows or other shows with these ending scenes. And so I'm not surprised that a lot of fans have already caught on to the importance of this 3-minute plus end sequence in The Bad Batch, which also skips forward in time. We start off with an aerial shot of Pabu that in a lot of ways mirrors the last aerial shots we see of Mount Tantus earlier in the episode. Pabu also has quite a spherical shape. I'm going to go on a limb here and say that this was done purposely to create the illusion that even Pabu eventually becomes a prison for Omega, an open air prison with tropical climate, beautiful beaches, shakes, and smoothies and stuff like that, but it's still a prison, which is why Omega sneaks off in the dead of night, alone and by herself. The city on Pabu seems to have recovered quite well from the floods and the Imperial attacks. You can see both the upper and lower city fully inhabited and glistening with lights. It's absolutely beautiful, and it kind of takes me away for a second, in all seriousness. Every now and then, even in this AI video generating age, I am blown away by a scene, and this is it. I mean, this scene really, it doesn't just transport me somewhere magical, it makes me want to go there. And it also reminds me of some of the places I've seen in my travels. We cut to the next scene where we see the silhouette of a young Omega. We can't tell at first it's her because it's a young woman we're seeing. A woman with her hair bound up high and tight out of the way so she can still do busy work and look good. I imagine Omega probably learned this trick on how to tie her hair from one of the very few positive female role models she had in her life, because like Nalase and Sid aren't exactly the most positive role models. Even if Nalase did redeem herself. I'm talking about Fee Genoa, guys. You guys remember her, right? She used to wear her hair just like Omega does. And when we finally see Omega's face, it becomes so obvious that Emery Carr was a clone because they really do look like sisters a lot. I also really love the yellow leather jacket. Leather motorcycle jackets are a mainstay in Star Wars fashion, especially amongst Outer Rim rogues. You guys remember Luke's own yellow leather jacket from after destroying the Death Star, right? Omega also seems to have a small little skull patch on her shoulder symbolizing the Bad Batch. You can see it more clearly when you mess with the exposure of the picture. Why the heck are all these Bad Batch shows so dark? Like exposure-wise, or is it just me? Is it just my Disney Plus? You also might remember this Kate from our little cameo with Asajj Ventress where she has her little trial with Omega. By the way, the fact that she's alive and didn't really appear much in the show at all is a good sign that they'll probably do something far more substantial with her in the future. Heck, we might even see her in the Tales of the Empire, maybe. Asajj Ventress is truly an underrated character. I mean, her death in that novel was excellent. It was a good death, but again, you're kind of wasting a character well before her prime, in my opinion. When Omega hits the lights in the cave, we see a new ship we've never seen before. It almost gives me Phantom vibes from the Rebels, and if you put this ship side by side with a VC X-Series auxiliary fighter, you see a lot of similarities. Which means this probably is a Corellian ship. You guys usually have a better eye for this kind of stuff, so let me know in the comments section below if you know what this is. I think the ship is important because, as Omega says, she is on her way to join the rebellion, and quote, they need more starfighter pilots. Given her connection to Hera Syndulla in the first season when the Bad Batch visit Ryloth, I think it's very possible that the individual that is telling Omega about the rebellion is Hera Syndulla. If it had been Captain Rex who contacted Omega, then it would have been the infantry for little Omega. She would have eaten protein paste every day and liked it, and she would have served alongside, I don't know, convicts newly freed from an Imperial prison. Her new show would basically last one episode in which Omega would die at the end of the episode, most likely from an artillery strike, which is what most Rebel soldiers died of. Seriously, like the ground war was terrible during the Galactic Civil War for the Rebels. You do not want to go there. Anyway, I'm gonna go further out on a limb here and suggest that this is Hera Syndulla post-Rebels calling for Omega. You know, after the defeat of Lothal, the Spectres kind of go their own way, but Hera Syndulla, who's always been the glue that held the Spectres together, would immediately be pushed into a command position within the Rebel Alliance. It doesn't hurt that she also saved Mon Mothma's life when she ran away from Coruscant. Mon Mothma becomes the leader of the rebellion, and you know, who you know is everything. Hera Syndulla gets commissioned as a general, which is a high-ranking command position in the Rebel Navy for some reason. She would then be stationed on the Lucra Hulk Prime, an old Clone Wars era Separatist freighter that had been converted into, surprise, a flight school. I think that's where Omega is heading to join the rebellion sometime after the Battle of Yavin and before the Battle of Hoth. A very important period in the Galactic Civil War that honestly has been criminally undercovered by films and TV. I mean, there were at least 3 years between episode 4 and episode 5. A lot of crazy stuff happened. You had the massive mid-rim offensive and then the disastrous mid-rim retreat. I mean, there were all sorts of novels and comics that covered this period of time. You have the epic Battle of Sullust, the multiple struggles for Mon Cala and the Mon Calamari mercantile fleet. Or what about the Coruscant Uprising, one of the craziest, probably urban combat scenarios we've ever seen in Star Wars. I mean, there are so many different battles, amazing stories that have been covered in the expanded universe that have never even been seen in live action. And I think that has a lot to do with just how expensive it used to be showing these kind of scenes. I mean, when the original Star Wars film came out, it was really pushing technology as much as it could go. But today, you know, especially with animation, you can show all of this for just a fraction of the price. And in a lot of ways, if you think about it, what makes the Clone Wars period so awesome is that it's very detailed. Not because of the prequel movies, but because of 7 freaking seasons of the Clone Wars TV show. Now, I'm not gonna say that Disney's going to make a Clone Wars-like show that takes place during the Galactic Civil War. I mean, they totally should. And it should be focused much more on warfare and the day-to-day operations of the Rebel Alliance. They didn't really go that route with the Rebels, really. It was more about the early Rebel period. And I am assuming that Disney, being very child-friendly, probably will not be more militaristic in how they approach the show. At least not more militaristic than what the Clone Wars was. But I would like to point out that Patty Jenkins from Wonder Woman fame just announced that Wonder Woman 3 is not going to be happening, and that she owes Lucasfilm a draft for a story called Rogue Squadron. The movie was previously canceled, and now it seems like it's back on again. Rogue Squadron, for those who don't know, is actually an incredibly famous starfighter unit, far more famous than even Red Squadron. It was first introduced in the expanded universe and later on introduced in canon. Named after the famous Rogue One group from the Rogue One film, which actually came out much later than when Rogue Squadron was invented. This is all very confusing again, stick with me. Rogue Squadron's founders are none other than Luke Skywalker and Wedge Antilles, survivors of Red Squadron and Battle of Yavin. Rogue Squadron would fly the first time together in canon when the Rebel fleet gets ambushed at the Mako Ta space docks, and it would serve with great distinction and honor throughout the entire galactic civil war. And in Legends, Rogue Squadron would still be active against the Yuzhang Vong and even fight Darth Krayt's empire more than a century later, albeit with a completely different roster. I think Omega would actually make a perfect addition to Rogue Squadron. There's a lot of things about the Bad Batch that reminds me of Rogue Squadron, actually. And, you know, Rogue Squadron, it's not just a bunch of pilots, mind you. I mean, these are pilots that go on away missions. They carry blasters, they fight hand to hand. I mean, they're very flexible, kind of like the Bad Batch was. And I don't really think Omega will just be a regular pilot. I mean, maybe she'll start like that, but remember, she has shown a remarkable ability for tactics and strategy that even surpasses Hunter and many of the Imperial officers in the Bad Batch show. I think she's actually much better off in a command position, or at least until she's maybe experienced enough she can at least be a squadron leader, or maybe just rogue leader. And so to me, it makes a lot more sense to see Omega in a Rogue Squadron film, especially because Patty Jenkins is known for having strong female leads. And with Omega, you already have a great character with a backstory that goes all the way back to the Clone Wars. It's just a natural fit. And obviously in live action, Omega will be played by the stunning Tamora Morrison, who at a tender age of 63 has an extremely bald head, which is really conducive to attaching wigs and hair pieces. Plus, Tamora really has Omega's cheekbones. Now, obviously, everyone is wondering if Omega will show her face in the second season of Ahsoka because of the Hera Syndulla connection. I think it's definitely possible, but the timeline is a bit wonky here. Omega is probably in her early 20s in the last Bad Batch scene, meaning that this most likely is the mid-Imperial era and not the New Republic era, which is when the Ahsoka series takes place. It doesn't mean that Omega can't exist or appear in that show. She totally could, but it just takes place a little later. It's really great seeing old Hunter there in his colorful fisherman's sweater. Clearly he never made the move to have that tattoo removed from his face. He also still has that trusty knife by his boots. He looks good for his age, honestly. And you know, I know everyone keeps commenting about how they want to see Crosshair and Wrecker age. I do too, but it makes sense that Hunter would be the one here waiting for Omega. And after all, it was Hunter who initially suggested that the Bad Batch go back for Omega on Kamino, and you know, basically it was because of him that they saved her in the first place. The two have always shared a special connection because of that. There's a lot of joy in the scene, but there's also a little bit of sadness and bitterness, I would say. And that's because, you know, we're really happy to see these clones, specifically Hunter, Crosshair, and Wrecker, retire to a peaceful life. They definitely deserve it. Every clone deserves something like this, especially if they're a combat veteran. But Tech's absence still really does dampen things, even now. I mean, I just imagine the life Phee Genoa could have shown Tech. I mean, she's a complete criminal and a bit shady, but Pootie Tang, you know? It's also sad that Omega feels the need to continue fighting and join another war, a war that the Bad Batch most likely will sit out. It also reminds us that all of the clone sacrifices could have never kept Omega from fighting again, because that is just who she is. And in many ways, that is also who they taught Omega to be. And at least this time around, Hunter and the rest of the Bad Batch have fully trained and prepared her for combat. She's no longer a child combatant. There are a lot of those in Star Wars. A lot of war crimes being carried out by the good guys. Which brings us to the very depressing conclusion that war never changes. I know that's like Fallout's tagline, but it really should be Star Wars' tagline, because war literally is continuous in this franchise, except for the Ruusan period. Now, I do have one issue with this last line here.
Hunter, you've all fought enough. It's my fight. I'm ready.
It's almost as if Omega has forgotten that she also fought already against the Empire. She was exposed to great danger, given weapons to defend herself. She was and is fully a soldier. She's a veteran. Let's not cheapen that fact. Let's not make her restart her journey to becoming a soldier. I mean, whatever show she appears in next, she should come out as a badass from the get-go, you know? the clone that was trained by the Bad Batch. She can definitely be a leader, just like how she was a leader on Mount Tanthus with all of those children. Heck, maybe some of those children might have grown up and made it back as well. And then lastly, it is great to see that Batcher is still alive. Although she is not a dog, she looked like dog, and so she dug. Also, Gonki has quite the battery life as well. He seems to be intact as well, which brings smiles to me. And of course, we have that last little Easter egg. Tech's broken glasses put right on the dashboard. A bit gruesome, if you ask me, because the broken lens is gonna make me think about what Tech's face would look like after he fell, which is, my mind's like that. I don't know why I think about these kind of things, but it's just weird like that. In all honesty, I would have fixed the goggles and still found a way to kind of honor Tech's sacrifice. But anyway, that's just me. So let me know in the comment section below what you guys think. What will happen to Omega here on out? Will she be in Rogue Squadron? Will she be in Ahsoka? Or will there just be another clone show that we don't know about where she'll star in? Let me know. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, my name is Alan, reminding you that my allegiance is to the Republic, to democracy. I'll see you next time.